You know that person who can turn almost anything into a punchline? The one who cracks a joke in moments that would unravel most people? Yeah, chances are they've lived through more than they ever talk about. And I'm not referring to awkward teenage phases or a couple of bad breakups. I mean the kind of chapters that quietly reshape your nervous system and permanently alter how you interpret the world. Picture this. Someone swerves in front of them in traffic. Horn blaring? Middle finger? Not even close. Their mind is already constructing possibilities. Maybe that driver just got terrible news. Maybe they're late to something important. Maybe their life feels like it's collapsing and this is the only thing they can control. When you've weathered hurricanes of your own, someone else's drizzle doesn't register the same way. Here's what rarely gets mentioned about people who've endured more than their share. Their brains don't malfunction, they recalibrate. It's not damage, it's adaptation. A nervous system sculpted by survival becomes incredibly efficient. It learned how to scan, calculate, adjust. It became a masterpiece of protection, even if it's still figuring out how to power down in a world that no longer poses the same level of threat. Underneath that surface calm, something else is happening. These individuals develop a strange resistance to chaos, not immunity to hurt. They still feel deeply, but resistance to being obliterated by it. They've internalized a powerful truth. Survival is not a question mark. It's a pattern. They've done it before. They can do it again. Here's where it gets unexpected. You might assume someone who's walked through fire would become hardened or cynical, shut down, suspicious of everything. And sometimes that happens. But more often, the opposite emerges. They become profoundly empathetic, almost fiercely so. They detect discomfort in others like a second language. A slight pause in your voice, they heard it. That smile that doesn't quite reach your eyes, they clocked it instantly. They're already thinking about how to circle back later, gently, without putting you on the spot. They've memorized the dialect of pain because they once spoke it fluently. They don't just hear silence, they interpret it. They can distinguish between the silence of exhaustion and the silence of resentment, between disappointment and grief. They walk into a space and sense emotional shifts the way others notice a temperature drop. While most people register decor and lighting, they register atmosphere, the invisible currents. And here's the beautiful part. Researcher Richard Tedeschi coined the term post-traumatic growth to describe something fascinating. A significant number of people who endure trauma don't simply return to baseline, they evolve. Their relationships become richer, their priorities sharpen. Ordinary moments take on extraordinary weight. A sunset can move them to tears, and they won't even bother pretending otherwise. They've learned that small things are not small at all. But there's another side that doesn't get spotlighted: hypervigilance. The alert system rarely shuts off entirely. Ever notice someone who always chooses the seat facing the entrance, or someone who mentally maps every exit in a new building? That's not dramatics, that's conditioning. A nervous system trained to believe preparedness equals survival. And then there's the minimizing. They downplay their stories almost reflexively. It wasn't that bad. Other people have it worse. I'm fine. It's as if they've developed an intolerance to being seen as fragile. Strength became their armor. Admitting struggle can feel like dismantling the only thing that kept them standing. Relationships become complicated terrain. People who have carried too much often swing between intense loyalty and strategic distance, sometimes within the same hour. They will show up without hesitation at 3 a.m. if you need them, but ask them to articulate their own fears, suddenly they're elusive, busy, distracted. Why? Because closeness once came with unpredictable consequences. If early connection meant instability, your body doesn't relax when intimacy deepens, it prepares. There's a paradox that lives inside them, a hunger for connection paired with fear of dependence. Needing no one feels powerful until it feels isolating. Yet something extraordinary develops alongside this tension: adaptation. When life shifts, they pivot. New city? They'll manage. Unexpected job loss? They'll strategize. Plans collapse? They'll rebuild. They've rehearsed resilience so many times that flexibility becomes second nature. And the humor, it deserves its own category. Often dark, sometimes sharp, always layered. It's not cruelty, it's reclamation. When you can laugh at what once nearly destroyed you, it loses some of its dominance. Humor becomes defiance. Each joke a subtle declaration you didn't get to win. There's also an intriguing relationship with control. They might obsess over tiny decisions while appearing remarkably composed about massive uncertainties. The reason? Experience taught them that large-scale outcomes are rarely negotiable, but the small details, those are tangible. So yes, they might overthink which mug to use in the morning while remaining unbothered by long-term ambiguity. It makes sense in their internal logic. They are living contradictions, soft yet steeled, guarded yet generous, realistic yet quietly hopeful. They understand that opposing truths can coexist. Life can be exquisite and brutal within the same breath. Both are accurate. Neither cancels the other. What's seldom acknowledged is the grief beneath it all. Not just grief for events or losses, but grief for former versions of themselves. The self that trusted easily. The self that didn't scan every room. The self that didn't rehearse conversations in advance or brace for worst-case scenarios. They mourn the innocence that felt lighter, the softness that existed before caution became instinct, the freedom of moving through the world without constant internal calculations. How do you articulate missing someone you used to be, especially when that version feels distant and blurry? It's like nostalgia for a home that only existed inside your nervous system, a childhood that felt abbreviated, a tenderness that didn't get enough time to fully bloom, a sense of safety discovered too late. This grief doesn't crush them, it refines them. It makes them attentive, intentional. They value calm because they understand chaos intimately. They treasure reliable people because they know what unpredictability costs. And maybe that's the heart of it. People who have endured profound difficulty don't simply survive, they acquire depth. They grasp that strength is not the absence of breakdowns, it's the repeated act of reconstruction, even when pieces shift, even when the puzzle looks different. What once threatened to undo them becomes insight. What once wounded them becomes compassion. Without fanfare, they evolve into something quietly powerful, a lighthouse in a sense. Not because their path was smooth, but because they learned to navigate storms. A lighthouse doesn't glow because it's flawless. It glows because it remembers the dark waters. It knows what it's like to feel lost at sea. So, if you encounter someone who seems unusually calm amid disorder, unusually quick to joke about their own scars, unusually comfortable with uncertainty, understand that calm was earned, that humor was forged, that steadiness was practiced. Every boundary they draw, every burst of unexpected tenderness, every moment of wisdom that surprises you, it all traces back to chapters they rarely narrate aloud. They've carried more than you realize, and somehow they're still standing, still investing, still hoping. That isn't accidental. That's resilience shaped by experience. That's psychology layered with poetry. If this video resonated with you, consider subscribing, and feel free to share it with a friend or loved one who might find it valuable. We'll see you in the next one.